Good morning, Manuel and everyone else visiting us on Zoom. My name is Jose. I work here at the Doña Ana Community College Library. And this fall semester, we'll be having six part series presentation on how to do academic research. And so the first one is today. So the series is called How to Improve Your Academic Research Using the DACC Libraries. And today's focus is on getting ready, right? How do you get started? And they're all important, right? All parts of the series and one can go on. But I think the first one is very important for our students because if they struggle from the get-go, from the beginning, and or they procrastinate and wait till the last day to, it's going to be troublesome. It's just so. One of the things I wish to stress is to let our students know they need to plan accordingly. Research assignments and projects are not something normally, are not something that they can do, not even over a weekend. It should take time, and with that time, you know, there's all these processes and steps that help revise, and so we want to make sure that students understand that. So to start off well is to plan well and to give yourselves time. So today's is gonna cover on how to do just that, but more specifically on how to pick a topic, right? A lot of times instructors provide assignments in a variety of ways where they ask their students to select the topic, right? Write or do whatever project they have in mind on whatever you wish, or from an approved list or something like that. So we'll cover some of those things, but this slide here is a picture of a website that the library houses. So the library has a homepage as it is part of the entire college, right? But we also have these live guides, these research guides, call them what you want, but they're websites that are my colleagues, mostly Susan and Therese, design for specific reasons, specific purposes. And they can be as broad as like a departmental website, like English, say, or community or communications, or they can be more specific for an instructor's class, or even more specific than that, it can be on a specific assignment, where the idea is for the instructors to coordinate and have conversations with us here in the library so that we know what it is they want, so that we can provide all that in one of these pages for them. And then all they have to do is either embed it or forward the link to their students. So if you hear me or anyone out from the library world say live guides, that's what we mean. They're basically these websites that we create, and we have total control over what we put on there for those specific reasons. So I wanted to start off mentioning that we've been doing these presentations on a variety of topics ever since the pandemic. So most of them, if not all of them, are located on this page here. And I have the URL there underneath it. Should be easy to find. If you need assistance, just let us know and we'll help you. But I just wanted to start off letting everyone know that today's presentations and the entire presentations are being recorded, and eventually they'll find themselves on this page as well. And one could then send students to these pages anytime because they're accessible all the time. This is a graphic. This is a graphic Susan created or had in one of her presentations before that I thought is very useful. Kind of gives you a graphic overview of what we're going to cover throughout this semester. And let me just say, sometimes not all of these steps are going to take as long as they do, or sometimes even some students may not need to cover each and every step. But I think in general, this graphic provides a good overview of that timing and planning that I was talking about at the beginning. Students should see something like this and say, wow, it's a process. I need to give it at least, I don't know, 7, 10, 2 weeks, 7 days. Get it in their mind that they should dedicate a little bit at a time. And as they do that, they chip away at it, but so that by the time they're at step 7, they've done all this work. And hopefully now they just focus on the revising or writing of their finished product, whatever it be, whether it be a paper or a presentation or any other type of format. But I think this is important to instill in our students that it is a process and they need to give it the time that it deserves. So I wanted to give kudos to Susan for either creating this or finding it. I don't know, but it's kind of helpful. So today we'll be on the first one, right? Step 1. And today's presentation, like I said before, stems from work that has been done before. And this is that page. This is that live guide that specifically talks about what we're going to cover today in the research project. In the research process of identifying your topic. So this is the live guide. You can see the URL there on the left-hand side. You can refer students to this page anytime. There is going to be, and there is a lot more information on this page than what I'm going to cover today. Today is simply a 20-25 minute overview of what students can find in this page and some talking points that I'm going to focus on. So I did want to mention that this is the page students can be referred to if after this presentation there are more needs, more questions, that type of thing. So it's very important when we do the reference interview, and for those of you that do not work in libraries, the reference interview is basically the conversation one has with the student to establish exactly what it is that student needs. And sometimes that is not clear. Many times students do not even know themselves what the requirements are. So it's very important for us when we have this conversation with students to refer them back to the instructions that the instructor wrote on that assignment, or any other type of communication that nowadays with hybrid and Canvas, it could be on an announcement, it could be on the rubric. We need to refer them to make sure because we need to establish clearly what it is they need. Sometimes students will communicate what they need versus what they want, or vice versa. So it's very important that we get that clear from the beginning in that conversation. Sometimes instructors will require specific resources and or formats. So those need to be understood from the beginning so that as we help them and continue on in this reference interview conversation, we can guide them exactly to where they need to go, depending on what those requirements are. Sometimes there are no requirements. Sometimes the instructor just does not provide any parameters, very liberal, very open, that's fine too. So, but that's still, the students still must come up with their topic, right? So coming to the library is a great place to brainstorm in terms of browsing specific resources, as you can see in this picture, or and playing with what the assignment is trying to aim for. What kinds of topics, what kinds of issues is the instructor trying to have his or her students explore? So the initial conversation we have with students is very important, because most of the time they're coming with us with stress, right? And if they waited and procrastinated, then you know for sure that they have this additional stress. So this slide here is just to give you an image of some of the resources that one can browse through with some ideas, and with the combination of those two things, the brainstorming can begin. And in that conversation, many times we can help the student in that direction that they need. Sometimes all they need is just some encouragement, or other times they need like resources to help them thinking along those lines. Again, it all depends on what it is they're writing about, right? Or what they're wanting to research on. But we have the resources and many of them electronically provide very, very smart texts and other technological, for lack of a better word, tidbits that helps, you know, students with a variety of options that they may not have thought of before or have seen to begin with. So it's important to involve them right away, that the library is the place where they can do both those things. They can focus on the topic and select the topic that they're going to choose for their assignment and start browsing some of these resources to get better ideas and get more focus for what they need. One point here that Susan pointed out that I thought was very important, and we kind of do this on the librarian side. It's called the preliminary searches. So when we're dealing with students and we're trying to help them choose a topic, for example, right? Sometimes we can help them with, you know, we'll come up with a question that a lot of times, especially for research papers, coming up with a research question helps because it helps guide the writing and the purpose for the paper. But many times those of us in libraries, what we do as we're helping students determine that, we do preliminary searches, which is we actually go to the database or to the catalog or to the internet, whatever it be, and start doing searches based on that conversation that I told you about with the student. We take some of those keywords and start typing them, and we'll see how many results come up. If we see that there are many results, then we can tell that to the student and say, hey, I think you're on the right track here. Consider these. There's a lot of results. On the contrary, if there are very few results, we also need to tell the students, maybe we need to change the topic. So that's what preliminary searches mean, and it is very useful in this stage of the research process. One example, you know, was during the pandemic, right? Very popular and it was affecting everyone, but a lot hadn't been printed yet because not all that information hadn't been cycled yet. So that's one example of a topic that's very current, but perhaps not well written on because of the timing factor. You can find a lot of news information immediately online, again, but we need to make sure the students understand the difference. Any questions thus far? So again, very important to make sure that these students understand, know where the instructions or the directions are for this assignment, and they understand them. So many times during that conversation, we in the library explain to them, you know, that an ebook is exactly the same as a book. So if your instructor said you had to use one book, you know, we need to explain that, and if there's an issue or problem, then we need to get involved or contact the instructor. But things like this need to be clear, very clear for the students. In this picture, this slide, you see Wikipedia among many of the others. And I'm a fan of Wikipedia, and for getting started, whatever a student normally uses or prefers to begin a search, right? We're talking about preliminary searches. We're talking about establishing the topic that they think they're going to use. It is okay for them to use these types of resources just to get a feel of what's available out there and to get started with some background knowledge. So that's in general what this picture is identifying, is that we can begin the trail with simple, more common, basic searches and such as Google and Wikipedia to get started and to take it from there. Ultimately, one though should remember the parameters that the instructor has put down, if any, and so it's a good place to start, but maybe not a final resource to use in the bibliography. So in helping students narrow down their topic, I used to teach this in a class where I would use this matrix, and I hope you can see the top of it. I can't because of this toolbar here, but what this is asking is, they're basic boxes where concept 1, 2, and 3 are the columns, right? And there's just one row underneath it, and that is synonyms. So what I'm trying to get students into writing, because taking notes is very important, always. Taking notes is always very important, is to, as we have this conversation about what it is they may be thinking about writing on or select their topic on, is to write down the key words. Maybe using it in pencil so that they could erase and write again. It's nothing formative, right? It's just, it's a tool to use to compartmentalize their thinking, and then the language skills of using different words that mean the same, thus synonyms. Because this will be important as they begin the searching once we go into step 2, to either broaden or narrow their search. So if they have these terms already written, it's going to help them when we get there. As one gets better at this, right? Graduate school, etc. This type of thing becomes natural. But for students, I think it's an important big step. Something like this that gives them a picture of where it is they want to go with their topic and their research. Underneath it is a picture of the Booleans of and, or, not. I'm not going to go into those, but it's just something to be aware of. I think the primary objective that I wanted to demonstrate in this slide was to get students writing down key terms and then thinking of other words that may mean the same. Because once we get into databases, those subject headings are going to play a big role. And if they have these written down, then they're ahead of the game. Any questions on this slide? And so this is the continuation of that assignment, right? After I have students write down those key terms, they have them put them together in statements, not necessarily full sentences, not necessarily in questions, just statements. Because then these statements could be used to be in combination of with these Booleans that I said I wasn't going to talk about, but eventually they will have the words and the statements that they could then use to combine to really narrow their topic and or broaden it. And this will make more sense once it's applied, let's say in a database search, right? Or an internet search. Once they have these concepts, these statements, these keywords, these synonyms, and they start using them in these electronic resources, it's going to make a lot more sense because the number of hits are going to indicate that. Right now, this is just an example of this assignment of what I had my students do, because sometimes they have a topic, but it's too broad, right? So helping them to narrow it is part of that, and then vice versa. So it's kind of a graphic that illustrates this type of thinking. And then underneath it is an example, right? There, I do have a question for this class. I had them come up with a question, but that usually becomes the last part of this assignment. So concept 1 is effects. Concept 2 is media. Concept 3 is children. Notice they're all broad terms. And then underneath each of those are a series of synonyms that I came up with. This is what I've been talking about. And so hopefully you can see there in the example there at the bottom that what effects does media have on children is something that's represented in each of these concepts and vice versa. And it should make sense. And if it doesn't, we just need to revisit it. But this is ultimately what I had students create in this particular assignment, which I think is useful when trying to help students come up with a topic. A lot of times they may have only one word and yet, and they're unaware of a different word that's more commonly used, especially if it's a technical term, for example. So having these synonyms can help tremendously. Again, getting them to write things down, part of the planning process. Any questions on this slide? And this is just a combination. So this would be now combining. So this is a very specific topic, right? It's got its 3 separate concepts, and now we're combining the statements to come up with a more detailed Boolean search, but I'm not going to go into that. But this is just to show the continuation. We want to get them started. We don't want to bombard them with a lot, right? We want to get them involved in thinking and taking notes and writing and browsing and experience. So I didn't really want to get into the Boolean searches yet. That would be in a later presentation. But I did want to show you that this was the end of that assignment that I was using to demonstrate this, and that again, this is part of critical thinking, right? Combining statements, combining concepts to come up with a question. That's critical thinking. So we need to capitalize on these opportunities for our students. And so once they have a topic, this could be, in fact, it probably should be a different conversation on a different day. We've helped them get started, and or the instructor may have input on this, where before they get going, they need to know that they have the green light. They need to know that they are on the right track, right? So this notion of narrowing and broadening needs to happen before they become comfortable and establish what it is they're going to do the research on. So there's a couple ways of doing that here on this slide. And of course, this presentation, like I mentioned in the live guide, is fully available in video format. These are questions one can ask students to consider in doing so, right? Because ultimately the goal is to have the student be 100% comfortable with both the topic and the direction that they plan to go once they start the research. Now, in a later presentation and step, we'll talk about sometimes there's a diversion. Sometimes it evolves into something else through the research process. And most of the time that's okay. In fact, that's great. But right now, we're just trying to let them concentrate on a direction to go. And if that happens later, then we're hoping that they come back for more help, or that they remembered how they did it the first time and they can just switch the topic and redo the search again. So there's a lot of ways of doing narrowing and broadening, and asking questions is a good way of doing that. I added this as an instructor. I believe it's very important for students to be able to, in a nutshell, right? Sometimes I hear it called the elevator speech. Basically, students, I think, need to have this skill of being able to briefly describe and identify what it is they're looking for, either in terms of research or what problem they're trying to solve for, like a broad critical thinking problems assignment. So I wrote, students should prepare a written statement and explain what their topic or question is, what resources are relevant and accessible, and what they seek to answer. I think that statement there kind of encapsulates where we wish to have our students when they become information literate. And in conclusion, students should address what they mentioned. So that's why it's cyclical. That's why it's important to really plan this out and give it time. In conclusion, the students should be able to either address the issue they sought out to seek information on, or to solve the problem they identified. There needs to be some kind of closure, right? And students need to demonstrate that. Obviously, in this sense, in a written statement, in a written format, but it could also be done in other ways. This is not the only way. But I thought this was something I wanted to focus on, so I created this slide. I think it's really important. Any questions, any comments? We're nearing the end. We're almost there. Manuel? No? No comments. Thank you. Here are some resources Susan compiled about this notion, this capability, this skill of associating words, right, and expanding to be more specific. So check out some of the resources there from her original video. Of course, I give credit to the references used in this presentation. Are there any questions? Okay, we said we keep these short. It's 10:25. If there are no questions. Thank you for attending. This concludes today's presentation. Until next time, it will be in 2 weeks, step 2. I believe it's the 27th. Can you verify that, Susan, or Therese? Does anyone have, because I don't have my calendar. I know it's in 2 weeks, but it's step 2. Do we have a specific here? Let me check here. Actually, it's hello? 21.
I think it's on the 21st.
Okay, yeah, a couple weeks, we'll start plan 2. Thank you all for joining us. Have a good rest of your day.